in your response to Humayra, I believe, on if Israel was safer today, you said that Israel had degraded Hamas, apparently a great deal, and so on. So I want to ask you, why the need to continue to bomb tent places and places where Palestinians are advised to go to for safe havens and so on, with F-35s and bombs that are 2,000 pounds?
So
why is there a need to continue to do this kind of bombing?
So I'm not going to speak to any particular decision about what kind of strike to use, but they continue to engage with Hamas forces in Gaza because Hamas forces continue to pose a threat. But Saeed, that just goes to the point that I was making, that they will never end the conflict in Gaza through a military response as well. It is going to take a political approach, it is going to take a different governance approach, and it's going to take an approach that means that something other than Hamas, and it can't be Israel, it can't be the IDF, but something other than Hamas is in Gaza governing.
But Israel continues to use these bombs, these huge bombs. In fact, bombing a coffee shop in the West Bank, which is an area they control. They should not be bombing by, aerial bombardment, coffee shops and so on. But you mentioned a point that takes me to my other point. Israel seems to be cutting off the north of Gaza from the south. They're basically, what is underway is nothing short of ethnic cleansing. Now, you all along have said, and the president, I think the secretary said that, I'm not so sure whether the president said that or not, but you don't want to see Gaza reoccupied. You don't want to see any part of Gaza reoccupied. Are you aware of these reports, and do you have a response to them?
We have seen these reports. Let me state first very clearly that no, we do not want to see Gaza occupied by Israel. We do not want to see the territory of Gaza shrunk in any way on a permanent basis. And when it comes to these reports, we are engaging with the government of Israel to find out exactly what it is they intend. But I will say, just generally speaking, we want to see people in Gaza be able to return to their neighborhoods, not being forced to leave their neighborhoods. Now, if there are Hamas militants operating underneath an apartment building, before Israel launches a strike on those militants, I think you would want to see the civilians evacuated. That would be something that would be a good thing for those civilians to see that they are out of harm's way. But it gets back to this broader point that I made, which is as long as you don't have a political path forward, and you don't have a solution to the very real governance questions, you can kill Hamas fighters, but Hamas will continue to recruit other fighters and continue to put the Palestinian people in danger and continue to endanger Israeli security as well.
That will give Israel a cause for continuing this war. I mean, nobody expected a year ago that this war would be going on at this time, but it is. And it can conceivably go on for many more months, maybe even years, and so on. What is the end game? What are you, in your view, what is the end game of Israel?
We want to see a ceasefire that brings the hostages home, that alleviates the suffering of the Palestinian people, that allows humanitarian aid to surge into Gaza. We want to see an agreement on a political path forward that ensures that Palestinians can choose their own leaders and that Hamas does not continue to reign as a terrorist organization over Gaza. And ultimately, we want to see Gaza and the West Bank reunited as an independent Palestinian state.
Now, let me ask you about...
that means that when you answered Saeed, you say you don't want to see Gaza reoccupied by Israel. You also don't want the West Bank occupied by Israel, right?
We want to see establishment of an independent Palestinian state in Israel. Yes, correct.
So you don't want the Israelis to be occupying the West Bank.
We want it to be.
Right.
We want it to be ultimately its own independent Palestinian state, occupied by Israel, not occupied by Israel or anybody else. No, we want to see it governed by Palestinians.
And then just secondly, and I've asked this, and I know others have asked this before, but when you talk about how you want a ceasefire in Gaza so that people can return to their neighborhoods and their homes, how many neighborhoods and homes do you think are left for them to return to?
So by various estimates, somewhere around half the buildings, maybe a little over half the buildings
50%.
in Gaza have been destroyed or damaged. There are other buildings, obviously, that remain, and we want to see people be able to return to their neighborhoods. And if they don't have homes, we want to see the ability to rebuild them, which is why one of the pieces we have said has to be a priority for the ultimate end of this conflict is a reconstruction effort, so people can rebuild their neighborhoods and rebuild their homes, because the devastation has been absolutely catastrophic across Gaza.
Who do you think should pay for that?
Ultimately, it would require an international effort with multiple countries contributing. We don't. Obviously, that's the kind of thing that would have to be worked out. We're not at that stage yet because we're not even at the end of the conflict.
Okay, fine. what countries should be included in this?
It's the type of thing that will be the subject of many diplomatic
Can
conversations.
I get to the very specific point here? Do you think Israel should contribute to this?
I think we are a long way from the reconstruction of Gaza, and I'm not going to make any pronouncements from the podium about who should pay for the reconstruction before we get into what would be a diplomatic.
I'm not asking who should pay, if someone should pay for everything, but who should contribute? Would the U.S. be willing to contribute?
It's not something we can speak to because these are conversations that will happen well down the road.
Let me just continue with a couple of questions. Although it was Israel that dropped close to 50,000 tons of bombs on Gaza, rendering where it is now. So maybe they ought to pay for it.
In response to a war that Hamas started. So maybe Hamas should pay to rebuild Gaza. I mean, it's a complicated question is the point.
Let me ask you about a report in Drop Site. And it says that Secretary Blinken approved a policy to bomb 8 trucks. That's what an Israeli cabinet member said. Are you aware of this report, and do you have any comment on it?
I am aware of the report. I'm glad you asked me about it. Look, the suggestion that we in any way signed off on bombing humanitarian convoys is absurd. It's just not true. Of course, Israel has the right to target Hamas militants. That has always been the case. And so look, if you had a situation where Hamas commandeered a convoy and Hamas militants were operating a convoy, of course Israel would have the right to strike those militants. That's not been the situation that we've seen over the past year, except in some very limited circumstances. There have been a few reports here and there of Hamas commandeering convoys, in most cases returned quickly to the humanitarian organizations. It has not been, there's not been any widespread evidence that we have seen of Hamas actually taking convoys and commandeering them, which is, I think, the scenario or the proposition that this scenario presumes. So the strikes that Israel has conducted on humanitarian convoys have been times when they have had failures in their deconfliction processes, where they have had intelligence failures, and when they've just made basic mistakes. And the thing that we have made clear about those is that those mistakes are unacceptable, and that humanitarian workers need to be protected, and humanitarian aid needs to be protected. So the idea that anyone in this department signed off on bombing humanitarian convoys is just absolutely ridiculous.
My final one, the president today issued a statement, and he talks about, the anniversary. He talks about, 1,200 Jews were killed, which is the highest number since the Holocaust and so on. But he did not mention the genocide that the Palestinians are subject to. He did not mention the fact that 42,000 people were killed. In fact, a group of American doctors are saying 119,000 have been killed. Is that negligence on his part, or is he not showing the kind of sensitivity that he ought to show?
So, Saeed, he didn't use
empathy.
He didn't use the terms that you use because we don't agree with those terms. But if you look at the president's statement, if you look at the statement from the vice president, if you look at the statement from the secretary, every one of them made clear that the consequences of this war for the Palestinian people have been catastrophic, and that's why we're ultimately working to end the war.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, Mark, the UNIFIL, the United Nations in Lebanon, put out a statement on Friday, I think. They said they are deeply concerned that by recent activities by the IDF immediately operating from a close position around them. Did you see that statement?
We did see the statement.
Do you have any comment?
I don't. Obviously, we don't want to see UNIFIL forces put in danger in any way. UNIFIL forces play an important role in establishing security in Lebanon, and ultimately we want to see them able to do their job implementing UN Security Council Resolution 1701.
Do you still see what's happening in South Lebanon, a limited operation?
We do. I'm sorry, it was when you were rather I answered this question earlier, yes. At the time, and that is an assessment made today, and we'll make our assessments on an ongoing basis, and if and when they change, we'll have a different assessment to offer.
Okay, you have confirmed several times that you are in contact with the Lebanese and you are working behind the scene. But the Prime Minister yesterday, he had an interview and he said not the U.S. officials reached out to them since he saw Amos Hochstein in New York before the assassination of Hezbollah Secretary General. Today even there was a statement by a bloc of opposition asking for the implementation of the resolution 1701, even 1559, and also some of them went far, not from the opposition. One of the Druze leader, Walid Jumblat, he asked to go back to the 1949 truce with Israel. But there's no U.S. engagement. It's like you are giving the Israeli time to finish the military operation. Why you are not engaging? And if you are engaging, who is engaging with them from this department or from the White House
So,
what are you doing?
So we have had ongoing diplomatic engagements with Lebanese leaders. I can't give you the who and the time here, but we have had it going on for some time. And I should say, just as importantly, we have had a number of diplomatic contacts over the weekend, some of which I mentioned earlier, and going back all through last week with partners in the region who are engaged with the Lebanese government. But I should make very clear, the solution to the political crisis inside Lebanon is not one that can be or should be dictated by the United States. Those are decisions that Lebanon has to make. And look, we have made clear for some time we want to see the Lebanese parliament elect a new president. We want to see the Lebanese government break the deadlock that that Hezbollah has imposed on it. But these are not the kind of these are not the kind of solutions that the United States can come in from the outside and impose.
But the Iranian foreign minister visited there, and 2 days ago, in Lebanon, the situation, it is not a domestic situation. It's a regional situation.
Of course.
Yeah. So
of course, and we have been engaged both with Lebanese actors and with actors in the region, making clear the importance of the ultimate implementation of 1701, making clear the importance of Lebanon breaking the deadlock that has existed that has prevented them from electing a president. But at least with respect to that last one, that is a question that Lebanon has to work through. We can offer our support, we can offer assistance, but those are decisions for the Lebanese to make for themselves. Sure.
Yeah, thank you. I have several questions too. You said earlier that we are in early days of this conflict. How long do you expect it to last?
I don't have any assessments to offer. Obviously, we ultimately want to see a diplomatic resolution.
Second, are you planning to keep asking the Israelis to keep the airport open?
We think it's very important that not only the airport be open, but that the roads to the airport be open so that American citizens who want to leave that can get out, but also citizens of other countries who want to leave, be able to leave, can get out. So yes, we want to see the airport stay open, and we want to see the roads to the airport be open.
And in your readout regarding the call between the Secretary and the Saudi Foreign Minister, you said that they discussed ongoing efforts to fund and support the Lebanese armed forces and the importance of international support for UNIFIL. Are there any specific steps that you are considering?
Nothing that I'm ready to announce today, but when I referred to ongoing diplomatic conversations in response to Hiba's question, that conversation with the Saudi foreign minister about a way forward is very much the type of engagements we've been engaged in the last
And lastly, do you have any information regarding the IRGC Quds Force commander, Kahani?
I don't. I've seen the reports of his possible demise as well as reports that conflict that information. We don't have any independent information of our own to offer.
Thank you.
Alex, and then we'll go to
sum up your line of questions with Humaira's side and others, going back to last year, both the President and Secretary advised Israel not to make a mistake of 9/11, so our response to 9/11. Is it your assessment that this is in fact what Israel has been doing last year?
Certainly they have made a number of mistakes along the way. There are a number of things that we think that they could have done differently and that they should have done differently, and we've offered advice to them at times, but ultimately they are a sovereign country that has to make its own decisions.
Thank you. On Iran and its proxies, you made clear last week that Iran had not notified you prior to its latest attack. Now, it happens, there are reports that it did notify Russia prior to it. Any concern on your end in terms of involvement of Iran's friends, allies into this war in Russia, China, given their collaboration in other fronts in Ukraine?
So certainly we see the deepening ties between Iran and Russia as something that's incredibly destabilizing for the region. It's incredibly destabilizing for the world. And that applies to the Middle East. It applies to everywhere that Iran and Russia operate.
On that line, there are reports that Victor Bout, who was released last year as part of the hostage deal, is back in business and is apparently a part of potential arm deal with Houthis. Any reaction from the state?
Yeah, look, so as we made clear when that arrangement was announced, and as we made clear at other times when we've made arrangements to bring American citizens home, these are always very difficult decisions.
Just a broad question to perhaps reflect a year on. It's the anniversary of October 7 Hamas attacks. It's also the anniversary of the start of Gaza war, which is, according to Palestinian health authorities, killed nearly 42,000 people. And everything we've lived through, I'm wondering, does the United States believe Israel is safer today than before the start of this? And given the United States has supported Israel throughout this, I'm just wondering if there is any reflection within the administration going back to the early days and sort of looking at the steps that you've taken, is there anything that the administration would have done differently since then?
So let me answer the last one first. When it comes to any complicated situation, and this, of course, is one of the most complicated situations on the face of the earth, of course, we look back all the time and look at the decisions that we made, look at the outcomes, and think about how we can do things differently. That's true when it comes to this conflict. It's true when it comes to Ukraine. It's true when it comes to, dare say, every situation in the world. And I think that's normal for anyone facing difficult decisions to look back and do, because you always want to look at the decisions you made and see how you can learn from them and see how you can make the best possible decisions going forward. So that is, of course, we have done that and continue to do that. That's part of our ongoing work to try and make sure we do make the best possible decisions to advance the national security interests of the United States. When it comes to, now remind me what the first question was, because I answered the second.
Israel is safer today.
Oh, and that one is a complicated, difficult answer to give. And I say it's complicated because certainly Israel is safer when it comes to the immediate threat that Hamas bears to the Israeli people. Hamas can in no way today launch an attack with the size, scale, and scope of the attack it launched on October 7th. So when it comes to dealing with the threat from Hamas, Israel is safer, at least in the short term. When it comes to the threat faced by Hezbollah, you have seen Israel degrade Hezbollah's military capabilities over the past 10 days or so. It does not mean they have eliminated them. They certainly have not eliminated them, but they have degraded them. But to the longer term question, is Israel any more secure? I think that's a very difficult question to answer, and it goes to the point you have heard the Secretary make over and over and over again, which is, as long as Israel is mired in conflict in Gaza, as long as it is dealing with an unstable situation on its northern border, as long as it is dealing with unrest and insecurity in the West Bank, ultimately its security is never going to be assured, which is why you have heard us, and you have seen us. You've been on the trips with the Secretary throughout the region, where he's spoken to this and said, the ultimate resolution of these conflicts needs to be one that has a political path forward that answers the aspirations of the Palestinian people. It needs to be a path for governance in Gaza by someone other than Hamas, because as long as you see Hamas continue to govern Gaza, either by name or in a de facto sense, you will continue to see insecurity for Israel. And you just have to look at the events of the past few days, where Israel is again conducting military operations in northern Gaza, a part of Gaza where they initially stopped major military operations, I think, last January. And they're back in because Hamas still has control of large parts of Gaza City and northern Gaza, because there has not been a path forward that provides an answer to the security questions and provides an answer to the governance questions, not let alone the reconstruction questions that very much need to be answered.
Right. So let me take that to Lebanon then. Are those questions at all answered or being answered, or are the answers being thought about right now because Israel is conducting an operation in Lebanon? And given that over the weekend, for example, it has targeted some densely populated Beirut suburbs, I'm wondering if the United States still sees this as a limited incursion.
We have seen the ground operations so far continue to be limited. We've seen limited incursions on the ground. That is not to offer any kind of forecast about what's going to happen. It's just an assessment of what we see on the ground right now. I would just say, with respect to the two situations, though, they are different. Lebanon is a sovereign state. Gaza is not, right? Gaza is was ruled by a terrorist organization. Lebanon is ruled by a government, an imperfect government in many ways, because Hezbollah has a veto on many of the functionings of the state, and the state does not have a monopoly on security. Hezbollah has maintained arms and the ability to thwart state security for many years. So it is a different comparison. So I just note that as a bit of a qualification.
Just on the limited incursion, though, what is the parameter for U.S. for this to be considered anything beyond limited incursion? What needs to happen?
I don't want to forecast what's going to happen, which I think I'd have to do to get into that. What I can tell you is we're watching this very closely. We support their ability to target militants, to degrade Hezbollah's infrastructure, to degrade Hezbollah's capability. But we are very cognizant of the many times in the past where Israel has gone in on what looked like limited operations and has stayed for months or for years. And ultimately, that's not the outcome that we want to see. The outcome that we want to see is the full implementation of UN Security Council Resolution 1701, which would mean Hezbollah forces push back from the border, UNIFIL and the Lebanese armed forces coming in, and those security forces, not Israeli security forces, but the IDF, the LAF and UNIFIL, taking the place of security forces in southern Lebanon and providing that buffer zone so Israelis in the north of Israel can return to their homes and Lebanese in the south of Lebanon can return to
But
their
are there
homes.
any active conversations about this? Because, I mean, at the moment, it does appear that the United States is greenlighting what Israel is doing in Lebanon so far. But do you have, and you just talked about how there was no post-war Gaza plan, there was no political pathway, and that left us where we are a year on in Gaza. But you don't seem to have anything concrete for what comes after Israel's Lebanon operation either. So isn't that a point of concern for the United States? That this risks being an open-ended
So
thing as well?
so I would just reject the first sentence or two sentences of the question. There are very serious ongoing conversations about this with our partners in the region, with the government of Israel, with partners outside the region, about what the path forward ought to look like. Just because we don't make the details of those conversations public, which we are not at this point, doesn't mean that we are not actively engaged in them. As you know, the Secretary talked to a number of his foreign counterparts over the weekend, the French foreign minister, the Qatari foreign minister, the foreign minister of Saudi Arabia. He talked to the foreign minister of Egypt earlier today. We are very much engaged in those conversations.
Final thing for me. President has said he doesn't want Israel to hit Iran nuclear sites and also like the oil facilities, but I'm just wondering if Israelis actually have given you any assurances that they won't do that.
Now, I'm not going to get into those private diplomatic conversations. We continue to discuss with them what their response will look like, and I will leave it at that.
Just to follow up on one bit of what you said to Humira, you said the ground incursions continue to be limited, I believe. So does the United States believe that the bombings in the Beirut area are included in that limited character trait that you guys are
I don't have a
wishing to
characterization
see?
of them one way or the other. They have been conducting strikes. They've been conducting strikes targeting Hezbollah militants, and certainly there are more strikes happening this week than there were 3 weeks ago when they weren't operating. But it's in terms of a sweeping characterization of them, I don't have one.
And so long as the Israelis are going after Hezbollah targets in those Beirut strikes, the U.S. is supportive of them doing that.
We're supportive of them targeting Hezbollah, but of course we expect them to target Hezbollah in a way that complies with international humanitarian law and that minimizes civilian casualties.
And have they done that so far?
That's never the question I can answer with a sweeping conclusion here. As you know, it takes an assessment of individual strikes before we can reach any of those kinds of conclusions.
And we know that this department is carrying out that assessment when it comes to Israeli operations in Gaza. Are you also carrying out that assessment when it comes to Israeli operations in Lebanon targeting Hezbollah?
I don't have any announcements to make today. We're in the early stages of this conflict, but that is the type of assessment we regularly conduct all around the world.
Well, why can't you tell us if you're looking into it?
Because
if you say
we
you
are in the very
regularly
early
conduct it?
we are in the very early days of this conflict. There are a number of assessments, a number of incidents we are having to look at with respect to Gaza. We have, I think, as you know, a limited number of people available to perform those assessments, especially when you look at the number of incidents that have been reported in Gaza. So I can't give you a readout of what we're doing with respect to strikes in Lebanon, but we take that obligation incredibly seriously.
Okay.